What's up, everybody? My name is Michelle Lawrence. I am your host, and this is Black Tea, a series about Black women in advertising presented by Muse by Cleo. I am so happy today to introduce our guest, Rediate Tekeste. Hey, Rediate.
Hey.
What's up? Please tell the people what you do and where you're based.
Yeah, my name is Rediate. I'm currently based in Los Angeles,
How did you find your way into this crazy world of advertising?
completely by accident. So definitely when I was much younger, I didn't realize this until hindsight. I used to make up commercials all the time because I loved like telling stories. So my sister would like yell a product at me and then I'd make up the commercial for it. But then when I got older, I thought I was going to be a journalist because that's like what I was going to do, and did a bunch of other stuff, did like nonprofit, worked at an NGO, worked at a corporate insurance company, definitely not marketing.
Yeah.
Then I became an influencer manager at a marketing agency. But the reason I took the job is because the influencers that we were working with were teachers in education, and we were working within the Gates Foundation. So that's what was more interesting to me. But then I got to the agency and then just stayed at an agency and then went to another agency. And then one day I was like, I think I'm in marketing. And that's kind of how I got here.
That's funny. It's like, all right, I guess this is my job.
I guess I'm in advertising.
It kind of picked you then. That's
That's
funny.
what I do now. Yeah.
So what do you think is one challenge you've had to deal with being in advertising once you made it there? Um, because you're a Black woman. And then how did you manage that challenge?
I think, I mean, they're the obvious things. So I grew up, I mean, I was born in Ethiopia, but I grew up in Iowa. So I've always been the only Black girl in every single room my whole life until I got to college. And then I was like one of five, maybe. So I was pretty used to, I always joke around that my mother tongue is code shifting. I'm like used to being like the only Black person in a room. I think in advertising, it wasn't that I was the only Black person in the room. It was like I was the only Black person in the room. And then I had to be the voice of like 1,000 Black people, which was pretty normal, but then it would have an impact on like something that another million Black people would see. So I think the pressure of having to say like, oh, I don't know, maybe we should put a Black girl in the ad, those type of things was, it's like the same pressure I think everyone faces when they're the only any minority in a room. I think that was pretty tough. I think secondly, pay. I think I found out like a really hard way that I was being underpaid, and that was devastating. And it took like a toll on all parts of me, emotionally, spiritually, personally, like everything. I think the angry Black woman, I like once I like started bossing up and being confident, even in like more diverse spaces, like really seeing that like the ABW, like other people's perception, that was really difficult. It's like, how am I confident, but then not angry for you? So just, I think the whole thing has been like a struggle, like trying to find the middle ground of like kind of navigating the advertising space, no matter if you're at an agency where you're the only Black person or you're at an agency where, you're not, you're one of many.
And do you feel like you've gotten, not to say the hang of it, but has that gotten any easier? Have you kind of relaxed that at all? Like, how has that changed over your time in the industry?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, yeah, I haven't, I mean, like you said, it's not got the hang of it, but yeah, it's definitely way better. I think that you experience it enough and you become aware of it enough. And then you have more friends that are Black women that you share stories enough. You have group text. I think it's like another form of therapy, like because it's just like a bunch of other people validating you. So at first, there's a lot of, I hate to use the word gaslighting because gaslighting means like a lot of different things, but like I think there's a lot of gaslighting you might even do to yourself where you like convince yourself that it's not that, it's like something else, right? Like maybe I was mad in this situation, or maybe I did ask for too much. But then the more women you have around you, not only Black women, but just like women that get it, the more you're like, oh shit, it's the world, it's not me, right? And I think that has made it a lot easier. So that makes it easier for immediate validation. So I can just, have enough group texts, I can just text and be like, this shit just happened. Am I crazy? And then, you have like five other people being like, no, and then share the similar stories. I think, I think when the older you get to, you have to decide whether or not you're going to like own your own. And I
Right.
think, in the last couple of years, I've just decided like, no, I'm just going to own who I am and what I am. And
Yeah.
that's helpful.
That's awesome. You definitely think having that group of women that you can kind of consult in that matter and check to make sure you're still sane helps
Yeah,
you a
exactly.
lot. That is super key.
Totally. I think also having people like direct reports or like young Black women that you're interviewing and like you want them to so badly win. And you realize like I literally pour everything into them. So I'm like, ask for more money, do this, don't let people, like all that. And I realize that like when you say that back to them, you're like, damn, like I should be also saying this to myself, right? Where it's like, don't like if they are in a situation, they come back and they're like, oh, well, so and so said that like I was really mad. I'm like, were you mad or did you just tell them what to do? Because that's part of your job, right?
Right.
And I think being able to say it out loud to someone else is helpful to hear for yourself.
So if you had to work in another department in advertising besides account, what would you pick?
So
Doesn't
this is
matter.
one of those
For
things
what
where it's
if?
like, if I had the skills to do
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
yeah, okay,
What would
maybe
you want?
creative.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe creative. Because I think I've been in strategy, I've been in accounts. I kind of forget what the other ones are. I couldn't be in social. I just, again, don't have the patience for it. Stresses me out. Like I
Yeah.
run a bunch of social accounts now and I'm
Yeah.
like,
I don't
oh,
think I can be trusted with that many clapbacks. Just
yeah, I'm like, really good. There's a social strategist here because my
yeah.
strategy is get mad right back. Like,
Right. It's like, okay, let me moderate this content then.
it's
How
like,
about
let me
that?
tell you what I feel. Yeah, so maybe creative. I think that'd be, I guess, more fun, depending on what brand.
Yeah. What is one of your career ambitions that you haven't realized yet? What are you aiming for right now?
Yeah. I think before I got into advertising, I was working at like a documentary film. So I think in advertising, I'd like to be, I don't even care about the award of it, but just make something more long form content that I just feel the same way that I did when I first saw that documentary film. It's just more like seeing like, even if it's 30-second, 1 minute, but like feel like just that same feeling. I think I'm chasing that same feeling of like just seeing something that you create that just brings out that much emotion in you. I think the last couple of years I've just been in social, so it's just been a lot of short, not emotionally captivating content, and I'd love to like make something like that.
Okay. And so you are doing some nonprofit stuff on the side, you mentioned. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. So like 6 years ago, I started a small nonprofit called Ethiopian Diaspora Fellowship. And what it is, we started a program where Ethiopian-American young professionals, so people like me, like I was born in Ethiopia, but I grew up in Iowa, so very much Americanized in a lot of ways. We go through a selection process and send 5 people back to Ethiopia for 6-month fellowship opportunities. And they partner or they work in nonprofit, public, and private sector, mostly in the private sector right now, for 6 months. The whole program is based on leadership, service, and creative storytelling. So obviously creative storytelling very much from like my personal interest, but also changing the narrative of Ethiopia. Service, being service oriented, and leadership. I mean, you like literally have to have good leadership to change any landscape of anything, even an advertising agency, anything that you need good leadership. So we've been doing it for 5 years. This last year was a hot mess because of the pandemic, but these poor fellows got chosen and then the pandemic hit. So we had to like pause, didn't send them back, and actually figuring it out in the next couple of weeks whether they'll go back this year.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's been crazy. It doesn't seem like it's real, but now it's like been 5 years. It's like kind of
That's
real, I
really
guess.
cool. So once they're over there, like you have programs and stuff set up for them, people have agreed to like talk to them. Are they just walking
Yeah,
around the streets?
once they're over there, the whole thought is like that you learn a lot from each other. So it's like what I said in the beginning about group text, right? So they live
Yeah.
together, all 5 of them live together, and then they all go to their own work. They don't go to the same job. So their work is matched up by like their skill set, their resume, their background, and they interview with us and they interviewed with the jobs back home. And then, yeah, they just like go to work every day and like live in Ethiopia like they would if they were like living here. And I mean, honestly, the idea is like, it's not your parents' Ethiopia. It like has to become your own because
Yeah.
it's a narrative that like your parents passed down to you, but that narrative is filled with a lot of their own, like either personal trauma or personal whatever. But it's like, you kind of have to find out what the country is for your own, right? And the only way that you can do it is if you're like immersed in it and go to work and live like another young professional, versus what a lot of us do, which is like go back for a wedding or go back for a funeral and like, you know, or go back for like some event and we like live this like rich person's life because we're coming
Right.
back with dollars, but we have no idea what the day-to-day looks like, you know?
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I just kept picturing like the real world opening when you
So
said they all live
it's
together.
so funny that you say that because our first trailer, like our first whatever, everybody wanted to make it that. And I'm like, no, y'all, you're not setting up a program for success.
Uh, Fine. Really cool. And that's not advertising. That's just any professional that they, you know, want to get into.
Yeah, but I mean, honestly, over the last few years, one, I'm like, thank God I'm in marketing and advertising because a lot of like what takes up money for those type of things
Yeah.
is like, you know, branding and marketing and like all of that, right? And you're trying to sell into like young professionals, so they have a standard for like what they want to look like or
Right.
like have things look like. And then the other thing is it's a huge growing profession in Ethiopia right now, marketing in general and
Yeah.
like just real advertising. So it's not all advertising, it's all over public policy, education, I mean, a lot of different things, but yeah, a lot of it intersects with what I do on the day to day.
That's really cool. I'm gonna
Mhm.
have to follow y'all. Keep me posted.
Perfect.
So, what is your biggest hope for the future of advertising?
Hmm. I mean, like one that will actually come true or one that I just hope for, just to
I
hope
mean,
for.
your biggest hope, not your most attainable hope.
That's what I'm saying. Like all of the rational part of me is like,
Yeah,
nope,
exactly. It's like,
no,
don't hope that.
like
Don't hope
throwing it
that.
out.
Stop hoping that.
Yeah, that I think, you know, one thing in the last 2.5 years that's been like amazing for me is I just working with like such bomb ass Black women in the last like 2.5 years. Like, you know, yeah, I realized that like I could show up as my whole self. And I've just never shown up as my whole self at work in my whole life, let alone just advertising in general. But like in my whole life, I've
Yeah.
not shown up as my whole self. And this was a space that I could. And not only like did I show up as my whole self, but I really realized my whole self in a lot of ways. Because when you don't show up as your whole self in a professional space, you don't even know what that person is, like who
Right.
that person is.
Right.
And I think I like figured things out. And a lot of it is like even the reflection from other women, you know, like just some of my like Black women that I worked with, and they're like, oh, when you say this, da 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 da. And I'm like, oh, I didn't even realize I said that. And it's because it's like, oh, I got to show up. And then you saw me for who I really am. And then you reflected that back to me. So I've done like a lot of personal growing.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I wish that wasn't something that you'd only get in certain spaces.
But I would love to, because this is a topic that has come up on a couple of different conversations on Black Tea, is the idea of showing up as your full self.
Mhm.
And for the people watching this who may or may not, who may not be Black women and who may not understand what that means, like how would you break that down? You know what I mean? Your full self versus like what your half self. Like if I didn't have that experience, how would you go about describing that experience to somebody?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. So I think if you're not a Black woman, like, you know, that when you're about to speak on a call or when you're about to be in a room or in that group, and then there's that voice in your head that says, do this, don't do this, don't say this. And it's like this little voice that like kind of imprisons you or polices you, right? Like imagine that, but much, much louder with also like vivid reaction. So you play out like, well, if I say this, then this is going to happen. So like that voice and amplify it by 100, because that voice can give you 100 examples of when it didn't go well for you, right? Like that's what it's like to be a Black woman in these spaces. It's like we have that same voice that you have in your head where we like, you know, that same little voice that's like, oh, let me just shift here, let me think this way, let me think that way. But that voice is much louder for us because it's backed up by a million examples of how it didn't go well for us when we did want to show up in that way. So we're constantly policing ourselves. And I like want to use the word policing ourselves because it's a fucking traumatic word for us, but we are like constantly policing ourselves so that we can show up in a space in the way that is most, you know, beneficial to our own professional growth and beneficial to the people around us. because it's not that like, oh, it's not that I don't love myself and that's why I don't want to show up that way. It's because I know that there's certain ways I need to show up in order to move up. And there's certain things that I need to say, right? So it's like you have to navigate those corporate structures that are set. It's the same way that like we walk in anywhere else. I think professionally it's just hard because it's 9 hours, 10 hours, depending, 15 hours a day. And I think that, yeah, it gets ingrained in you. And we've all seen and heard what happens when you do show up in that way and how you're misunderstood.
And I understand, and it also just speaks to the privilege of choice. Having the option to choose from a plethora of places where you can show up as your whole self, as opposed to being limited to that, you know, and only feeling that, not being able to feel that feeling everywhere because you stick out like a sore thumb in most places. So really, but yeah, it narrows the range of choices that you have where you can feel like you can just be yourself and focus on your work. So that's the life. Fix it, advertising.
5 minutes.
Okay, what are your favorite sounds right now, just for inspiration? Like, is it music, podcasts, meditations, sermons, nothing?
I mean, I listen to this American Life podcast. It's so like NPR-ish, but
Yeah.
it's helpful because it like takes me out of my own life. I
Mhm.
think this pandemic, we've kind of just like somewhat become narcissistic because the
Yeah.
only people you see are you, yourself, and I. So
Yeah.
you're just like the world. It's so hard, and it's just
Yeah.
me. So
Even
I
on
think
Zoom, it's like, what is my reaction to that? Like,
that
I'm looking at myself.
let me pin my video and see how I'm gonna handle this situation. So it's like, yeah. So I mean, I've always listened to This American Life, but like lately, I've been trying to listen to it more because I'm like, I need to get out of my own head. Music, I've been listening to like really, I think random stuff. I don't know. I've been listening to some like Ethiopian like hip hop music, which has been nice and just gotten me out of everything that could kind of just get you out of where you're at right now. I
Yeah.
think has been helpful. Last year I was listening to a lot of Jessie Reyez. Do you know who she is?
Okay. Yeah.
But girl was too emotional. Now I'm gonna have to back up. So I'm like, this is getting heavy. She's like always sad.
Yeah.
Like
Gotta
music
balance
has
that.
such a mood. Yeah, for
Yeah.
me it's like, yeah, I think most marketers, maybe just any sort of content whatsoever, like sways us really quickly. We're like, the whole world sucks. You listen to
Yeah.
one song and I'm like,
Right. Yeah.
right,
One
that
Taking Back Sunday song, and I'm just like, hey, y'all.
sucks.
That was
Yeah,
my go-to angst.
I had no idea too. Like, if you really think about it, it's like I had no idea that there's certain people, and there's probably why the reason that we're in marketing is like content like that really does move us in
Yeah.
whatever direction. I'm like, it's not that I'm emotional. It's just that like if you play that song, it's gonna like bring up a lot of things. A lot of things. It's like,
That's
like,
funny.
I
It's not
know.
that I'm sensitive, but just be really aware of everything that you
Everything you put in front of me. Whereas like my sister, I love my sister. She's a forensic psychologist.
Mhm.
Music like is there for her, but I mean, it's not gonna be the world. Like it's not
Yeah.
like stop the song. I can't do this right now.
That's funny. I've been historically diagnosed with clinical depression. And so when I had my rough patches in college or after college, I had to ban myself from listening to Kid Cudi. Cause like
Oh,
he
Jesus,
will just, it's one thing to feel seen in that space. And then it's another for him to be like, let's spiral downward together. Yeah. And that's kind of like how it
that's
was.
so true.
Yeah.
That is so true. Though.
Yeah. It was like
Oh my
no
God.
Cudi on bad days. You just need to like it can be a hindsight song. Like listen to it and remember how you felt like that last week. But in the moment, no.
Yeah.
Too much.
You don't feel that way. Oh, that's so crazy. I always thought, yeah, that's validating. Thank you. And then shows, I mean, like you said earlier, like sometimes you just need mind numbing shows.
Yes.
Like I actually like watch Friends to mind numb because work has just been like really intense the last
Yeah.
couple of years. I mean, a couple of weeks, couple of months, I don't know. When is it never intense? I mean, I would love to know that from everybody else. Like, is there a world in which it's not intense?
Yes. But I don't know, I haven't heard yet about a world where it's not intense and also you care about what you're doing. And that should be an option. you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not intense when you're like marched out to pasture and you're just like, for lack of a better term, when people who have made it and can just kind of go relax and do easy stuff and not try that hard. And
Yeah.
I don't even know honestly how true that is, because I feel like those people are still at least working long hours, even if they're not doing something cool. I just want you to brag really quickly about yourself and being amazing in this space that isn't always conducive to us being amazing. So can you tell the advertising world why it would be a huge mistake to underestimate you?
Oh, I loved that question, by the way. A huge mistake to underestimate me. I think I came into advertising already underestimated, just being a Black woman. But like over the last, let's just even 2.5 years, like I've built multiple teams, gone from like eight to like 30, brought in 4 AORs to a huge agency by a tech Google. So like one after another based on a relationship with the company and with the people at the company. And it hasn't been pitching it. It's just been organic growth by building dope ass teams that could do great work and the clients trusting us. And I think it's been really important that I like led with empathy, but just bossed up in these moments and navigated around, an agency that was growing like really, really fast, but navigated around it in a way that could protect my team, grow my team, and do the work that the client needed. I think that when you look at Black women, we already hustle as it is. So it's like you should expect them to do things beyond what you think that they can do because you're already under expecting everything from them. I feel like I built a team with a lot of young women of color on purpose because I knew I needed to get shit done. So not only don't underestimate me, but don't underestimate the team I put together because it's going to be young women of color that are going to push it through.
Love it. I feel like that's a great place to end it. Thank you so much for sitting down with us today. I can't wait for the world to hear your story. You're amazing. And I can't wait to follow your nonprofit and to see what you do next. Thank you so much for being with us on Black Tea.
Yeah, thank you.
And that's our episode, y'all. So thank you so much for watching. Please go to musebycleo.com/black tea to catch the rest of the episodes. Bye.